I think I remember at my bachelor party when we all went to Mount Hood and everyone went skiing, Scott, except for you and Andy. You guys stayed at the cabin, and I think you guys played like Xbox and chess the whole day. And
We-
also, Andy was like,
Dude, the reason I did that is because I'm scared of skiing. Just don't like heights.
as you should be. It's very, very, very dangerous and scary. But did you beat Andy when you play him at chess?
I don't remember. I think I might have memory hold that one because I can't. I couldn't have him beating me, but he did. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's a 10-year-old kid. All right. Well, he's an inspiring chess player. And speaking of inspiring, gosh, my segues are just on cue right now. We have a little segment for you guys, Scott, that we have prepared, and it is of inspirational athletes in 2024. So we've each kind of just named a few athletes that give us a little bit of inspiration here and that we are going to talk about. So without further ado, Scott, shall we enter into drumroll? Mikey, drumroll.
Okay, I don't have my sticks.
2024 inspirational athletes. Scott, you want to start us off?
Coming in at number 3 on my inspirational list of 2024 athletes or people just who happen to be in the sports realm, right, is Joe Mazzulla, head coach of the Boston Celtics. I know we've been dunking on NBA and the ratings plummeting and so on and so forth, but I find Joe Mazzulla to have been one of the most inspirational dudes in the sports world of 2024, strictly because of his perspective and the way in which he leads a group of young men, while also being a young man himself, a family man. This guy has gotten dudes like megastars like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to do stuff that is beyond them, right? And also in pursuit of something beyond them and something that's far greater, which is the team element of things. And also outside of that, he's no stranger to professing his faith to the public. And that's like, as a dude of faith myself, like I love that stuff. And seeing that from a leader of young men, because I think that's so few and far between these days. I mean, we saw it here with the Broncos, the Boise State Broncos last night. Clearly their coach has had a huge impact on players himself. And I just think that we need to get back to that, having a head coach who's not just all about the wins and losses, but about helping develop young men with a perspective on life, not just about, again, the wins and losses of the sport. So Joe Mazzulla right here, him embracing his faith, bringing that into his perspective, into his coaching style and mantras is second to none. And I got to tip my cap to him here in 2024 for winning the NBA title, and hopefully they see success here in 2025.
God, I didn't rank my guys. Mine are in no particular order.
Yeah, no. I guess it's not a ranking. I'm just like, I'm looking at my list and I'm like, okay, who fits better, what, when, where, how.
Okay, here we go. All right, you guys ready for mine? All right. After being the number 1 draft pick a few years ago, Baker Mayfield led, Scott, your Cleveland Browns to their first playoff victory in 26 years, and he battled through injury, and then he was cast aside by the franchise. Now, I know there was like some attitude stuff and maybe some maturity issues back then that they didn't like, but the Browns kind of sent Baker off into exile. He landed at an organization that might be even more dysfunctional than the Browns, the Carolina Panthers. And this dude was kind of at rock bottom football-wise when he was at the Carolina Panthers. Like there's photos of him taking scout team D-line snaps while with this team. Rock bottom for a former number 1. Across the country to the LA Rams. And the first game that he played there, did a great job, had a game-winning touchdown drive. And this eventually led to him getting the opportunity at Tampa Bay. He's now played for 4 teams in 3 years. But at Tampa Bay, he seems to have really found his footing, and he's earned the big contract, and he's playing the best ball of his career. The reason that I have him as an inspiring athlete is because he said publicly multiple times that his wife, Emily, got him through these difficult and dark times in the NFL and helped him get to where he is now. He's now a father to a little girl, and he's now leading the NFL in touchdown passes. I think that Baker's story is super inspiring because it's such a testament to the power of a good marriage and also the power that a man can develop from becoming a father. He's like clearly entered into a whole different chapter of his life, not only on the football field, but also off the field, the way that he conducts himself, the way that he interacts at the podium. He just feels more settled, more mature in his behavior. From the outside looking in, it kind of just feels like he's relied on a good marriage, been able to lean on a good marriage, and then taking the responsibility of fatherhood. These things have elevated him in so many ways. And it's also just shows how the family unit is really the backbone of society, and that a healthy families can lead to great performance and productivity outside in the world. And so that's why Baker Mayfield's story is very inspiring to me. And he is on my inspirational athlete list. What do you think of that?
I like it. I like it. Sounds like a recently engaged man. I like your outlook, how it's changing on relationships and future marriage. So it's love to hear it, dude.
A lot of propaganda is what I'm hearing.
That's Mike.
A lot of propaganda. Seems like you're pushing an agenda, Nick. I will say something about the dad strength. That is real. I played against a lot of guys in college who had kids,
Hold on,
baby mamas, and boy, were they scary to go against. Here's the scariest guy to go against in football: a guy who just became a father and who doesn't know his father, which is who I was competing against on a daily basis.
That's sort of a different situation than Baker's, but that is also very scary to go against. Okay, Scott, who you got next?
All right, second on my list, a little different from what we're usually talking about, but it is Sydney McLaughlin, coming out of the 2024 Summer Olympics out in Paris, which had a lot of stuff going on outside of just athletic competition. We all know that. I think she comported herself and also performed to a level that was undeniably inspirational, right? So every time she got behind the mic, she seems like such a well-spoken woman. She obviously has her head screwed on right. In the same vein as Joe Mazzulla, has her sights and her pursuits directed towards something that is far greater than just athletic competition. But she's been blessed with these gifts, which she fully admits to have been given to her, and she's trying to maximize them, which is ultimately what the Olympics is all about, right? Pushing the human body to greater heights, and trying to find that perfection. And it's all about the pursuit of that perfection, right? And continuing to pursue that. And her outlook on life happens to be her faith, God, so on and so forth. But she puts a lot of her energy in honoring the one who has given her all these gifts and athletic abilities. And she truly embodies what the original motto of the Olympics was, which I think was coined back in 1921 by a priest, which was Citius Altius Fortius, which is faster, higher, stronger. And I'm not a huge fan of the adjustment made in 2021 during Japan, which added another word to it, together. But it's about the individual, and it's about the celebration of us watching people strive for that height. And she's done it to a wild degree. I mean, look at this video, her just breaking away in the finals of the 400 meter, ultimately setting a world record, which hilariously enough is her breaking her own record for the 6th time, which is nuts to say. That's her going back to me saying like, oh, you're striving for greatness. She's continuing to do that. So Sydney McLaughlin is my number 2.
Number 2. I love the idea because that of just competing against yourself. That's like basically what she's doing. She's in such a category of her own that the other competitors can't even compete with her, that she has to compete with herself. And I think that's something that we can all strive to do. They say, what's that quote is like, I am not trying to be better than my fellow man. I'm trying to be better than my previous self. Yeah. And I think Sydney McLaughlin embodies that really well.
Mm-hmm. You see these athletes like this who are so involved in their faith. These are the ones that always stay at the top the longest because they humble themselves to something. You see these guys who get big egos, look at Cam Newton. Okay. Big egos. Okay. They can't humble themselves to anything. If you can't humble yourself to a higher power, you can't humble yourself to the work. Okay. And it translates, it trickles down, and then you're out.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Great points. And then you start dressing like a 1400s or 1200s court jester as well. Because obviously,
exactly.
Godless behavior. Okay.
Pretty good.
There we go. Nice. All right. Another person that I want to highlight on my list, I'm a little bit biased because we know him personally. Solomon Thomas of the New York Jets. Solly was a top 5 draft pick. in 2017, I believe, and he was kind of seemingly on top of the world at this point. And his family was struck with the absolutely horrible, horrible tragedy. They lost his older sister to suicide. I think she was in her early 20s, and it was an incredibly devastating situation for a person and a family to experience. But Solly's response to this is super inspiring. He started a foundation called the Defensive Line. And this foundation aims to transform the way that we talk about mental health, especially for youth, and to try and end the epidemic of youth suicide. He's done absolutely incredible work in the community off the field, and he uses his platform in a really meaningful way. And I think to take that pain that he and his family have experienced and to turn it into something positive that helps other people, it's a really beautiful and inspiring thing. And in my opinion, he lives a life that really honors his sister and her memory. He's a guy that's a great example also of being more than just a football player. He's got a lot of interests and is such a complete human off the football field. And he has just been nominated for the third year in a row for the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year, nominated by the New York Jets. And hopefully this year he wins it. He deserves it. So Solomon Thomas is my inspirational athlete.
Dude, I love it. I love it. Nice selection. And I hope he wins it. Because I agree with you. That story is it's a powerful one, and the way he's comporting himself after going through such a family tragedy is commendable, to say the least. So, all right. And at the top of my list here is no stranger to our conversations here, but it's got to be Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings. Quarterback came in as QB2 on a roster, had been a journeyman after being selected third overall in the 2018 draft, had high expectations, went to a garbage organization at the Jets, ultimately didn't pan out, wasn't developed, didn't find the right opportunities while there, was seeing ghosts, as was infamously leaked by NFL Films. I don't know why they blew him up like that, but they did. And has since been a bit of a journeyman, like I said. So he went to the Carolina Panthers and the 49ers, but he seemingly found a home in Minnesota. And I think a lot of that has to do with the organization that's around him, the head coach that is there right now, having also been a somewhat of a journeyman in the NFL, a journeyman quarterback, mind you, in the NFL in his career. So we all saw the viral video of him coming through the locker room after a huge win over the division rivals, the Green Bay Packers this past weekend. Everybody celebrating him. No team celebrates a dude like that unless they truly love him and trust him in everything he's doing. This guy is beloved by his team, beloved by his coach, who was sitting there watching, probably just incredibly happy for a guy to have picked himself up when he easily could have given up on his career and his athletic abilities, because that's such a difficult thing to do, is just get your mind right and then not only perform, but to perform at the level that he's doing. I think it's second to none. This guy, he should be in the conversation of MVP. I can't believe he's not. I know we'll touch on that a little later, but Sam Darnold takes the cake for me here, and most inspirational in 2024.
Dude, he absolutely should be in the MVP conversation. Yeah. I like that a lot. That's a super inspiring story, because that talk about a comeback. That's just kind of your textbook, storybook, whatever kind of book. I went to film school, dude. Okay, I know.
You don't read any books.
Audiobook. Comeback. Sam Darnold. We'll talk about him more actually a little bit later in the show. I got my last one, most inspirational. Not most, just he's one of the inspirational. Still on my inspirational list. The greatest of all time, and do not argue with me on it. Michael Jordan. Why am I picking a 61-year-old guy to be in my most inspirational athletes of 2024? Well, you never stop being an athlete when you're an athlete, okay? So he's still in the conversation. Michael Jordan just opened up a health clinic in his hometown of Wilmington, North Carolina, with a $10 million donation. And this is actually the third one that he's opened up. And it's so weird because we never really hear any media coverage about the good stuff that Michael Jordan does. Like, we hear all the time about LeBron James's endeavors, like his promise school and all the stuff he's doing off the court. But I had to scour the internet to find even a clip of the opening of this medical clinic. And it was actually really, really beautiful to watch the speech that he gave there. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's just super refreshing to see an old school athlete like Michael Jordan move the way he does. He's always made a point to not be divisive, dating back to like his early days in the NBA.
Yeah.
And I think that he has recognized the sports can transcend politics in a way that not a lot of modern athletes seem to be able to understand. It's also cool to see him taking action in his community. You know, like he made a personal donation here, and if the government were to try and make this happen, it probably cost $1 billion and only get halfway finished, and then they pat themselves on the back. So it's really cool to see a private citizen step up and contribute back to his community. He can dream, and so Michael Jordan is in my most inspirational athletes of 2024.
I love it. Yeah, it's going back to, I mean, we're talking about new age athletes all the time, and I completely agree with you. The way that Michael Jordan approached it was textbook, and I think we need to kind of get back to a little bit of that. I mean, we're talking about guys building up their own brands. Talk about a guy who built up the brand and the brand that like others are attaching to at this point in time. So it's like, this is incredibly inspirational, not to overuse the word, but one of the cooler things I've seen from an athlete, former athlete as well, in 2024. So great pick.
Yeah. So MJ, still the GOAT. And if you want, if anybody wants to do the debate with me, LeBron or Michael Jordan, I'm right here. Okay. I'm right here and I will debate
we might get into that a little bit later, but dude, I got to give a bonus, a little, call it my fourth person of 2024. And this will probably help us segue into what we should be diving into in this college conversation. But my bonus person of 2024, being a homer here, but as head coach of the Notre Dame football Irish, Marcus Freeman. On the field, off the field, the way he comports himself, the way he addresses the media, the way he addresses the difficulties of a season. You know, we point to the loss this year at home against the directional Illinois school, and the way in which he's gotten the team back on track and performed since then has been incredibly commendable. And clearly he has a finger on the pulse as to how to lead young men. Again, I point to Joe Mazzulla being a young man himself. Marcus Freeman isn't all that old either. So he's able to help develop these young men, not only on the football field and getting W's, but it's clear he's also helping them in the direction of life and developing them to view the world outside of just sports, but to approach it with that same sort of vigor, that same sort of energy and pursuit of perfection outside of that, all the while giving glory to something that's far greater. At a university like Notre Dame, I find it incredibly beautiful that he was able to reinstate what had been a long-standing tradition of pregame mass for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. Now, it's crazy that was ever nixed under Brian Kelly, but I've also stated many times that I don't think Brian Kelly was the best fit for Notre Dame football at large. So I was happy to see him go to a certain extent, all the while he had great success on the football field. Marcus Freeman is the right guy for this job. That respect toward tradition has clearly paid off on the field for the Fighting Irish, and I'm just got to give him his flowers, the bonus flowers, moving forward.
There is a 1-to-1 correlation if your team goes to mass before the game to success on the football field. Let's all remember that, okay? Mike, did you guys go? Did you go to pregame mass or chapel before your games in college?
No, that's why we were 2-11 my first year. John Smith actually, we implemented before games. We'd have there'd be a group in the locker room that would do a prayer, but it was like optional thing to do.
Yeah. That at Georgetown it was really cool because we had obviously it's a Catholic university and they have all of the priests living on campus in their residence. They have awesome residence, just brand new, just beautiful, and we got to go in there and do our masses pregame. But that's always that is such a great thing leading into a football game in order to kind of center yourself and calm and get in the right mindsets and remember what you're playing for and the things that are bigger than the game. So it's a super important thing. And Notre Dame is seeing some success on the field now. Brian,
it was good for a guy like Nick so he could have pregame confession every week.
He needed to get right.
Please forgive me of these sins before the game. I'll be back next week.
For I have sinned. I destroyed a running back in practice. His name was Mikey Alfieri. Okay? Right, Mike? You remember that?
I'm out of here.
Speaking of college football, Scott, your boys, they are alive, but
Got a big one today.
got a big one today, probably right about as the time we're posting on this, but we got to look back to yesterday, Penn State, Boise State. This one I don't think was super surprising that Penn State came away with the win. However, I saw some people were kind of surprised at Boise State actually hanging in there. Now, if you'll throw this up, please, Mikey, once I can get it. Boise State actually hung in there, and it was a reasonable game, despite the fact that they had 3 turnovers. Boise State actually did not play well, and this, in the grand scheme of things, Mike, you can throw this up here. This tweet here says this game was not decided by the talent gap, even though that's what a lot of the national conversation will be. Boise State just had too many self-inflicted wounds. In my opinion, if Boise State were to play a little bit of a cleaner game, this could have looked a little bit differently. What do you think?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it uncharacteristic of the Broncos to turn the ball over as many times as they did, and especially Gentry. I think he had 2 fumbles leading into the first half, and up until that point in the season, he only had 2 fumbles throughout the entire season. So this was like a total. I don't want to say meltdown, because obviously they made it competitive and they had a shot and an opportunity, but a couple different situations with penalties and everything derailed them from being able to capitalize on certain situations. But this was just an uncharacteristic sort of competitive game for the Broncos, and it's unfortunate because I think they had an opportunity to really show the world that they belonged, and that Penn State may have gotten a little bit of a helping hand, call it.
Yeah. You know what? The announcers stole Andy's line from the interview that we had here on this show talking about Genty. Andy said he had such great contact balance. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And the broadcasters stole that. So plagiarism.
Copyright.
Copyright. Mike, you were talking the other day about how, we love these dome football games, these indoor football games, because it's perfect conditions and we see actually good offense. Boise State was turning the ball over left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what do you have to say about that?
They're idiots. Okay, they have perfect conditions. They have no excuse. That's just, that's the benefit of playing in a vacuum like that. They don't have the excuse. So they have to go, okay, we didn't prepare the right way. See?
Sure. Okay. Do you think that was
real court?
Well, do you think that was because both teams made a lot of mistakes? Penn State has been in more large games like that. Like they play Ohio State previously. I know it was a home game this year, but bigger games like that. Boise State, not so many super high profile games. Do you think that they had a little bit of the jitters, or that moment was the lights were a little bit too bright for the guys on Boise State?
I completely think so. I think, obviously with the big games, guys can easily psych themselves out. And then you see that with 2 fumbles. It's so uncharacteristic of him. I think the moment and the pressure of trying to break the record got to him, and he kind of psyched himself out because he missed the record by 27 yards, Barry Sanders' record. Yeah. So I think that's definitely a big factor.
Damn. What I did appreciate about the commentators were the fact that they did point out that during Barry Sanders' record-breaking season, they didn't include the bowl game yardage. So I did appreciate them acknowledging, oh yeah, he's really close, but this is an extra game on top of it. So that was cool. But yeah, to Mikey's point, it did feel like there was an element of Genty being a little juiced, and it's almost as though he wanted to prove that he deserved the Heisman more so. And maybe that was an element of his, call it first half blunders. But at the end of the day, Penn State is a very good football team, and they have an incredible defense, especially coming off the edge. Number 11, I'm forgetting his name right now, but that dude's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick because he's just an absolute animal. So but his ability to still get, I think he broke 100 yards or at least tickled it.
Genty? Yeah, he had 105.
Yeah, 105. So his ability to still generate that sort of production while facing a very formidable defense was impressive nonetheless. And I mean, you talk about Andy's comment about his contact balance. There are so many clips of Genty just breaking tackle after tackle and making something out of nothing. So it's hard to fault him because clearly he was fighting for it as much as he possibly could, but it also could have been biting him in the ass a little bit, as Mikey's speaking to.
Mike, I want to ask what is how mental are fumbles as a running back, Mike? Because that seemed like, I mean, as we said, he only fumbled twice in the entire season leading up to this. Then he fumbled twice in the first half of this game. Is that just a super jittery mental thing, Mike? You think?
I think it's a mental thing, and then after one, you get in your head, and then you're overly focused on the ball, and then you start running tight. And like the worst thing are running back coaches who overharp the hold on to the ball before the plays and before you run it. That's the dumbest thing to do as a coach. Now your mind is only on holding the football. You're not seeing the holes. You're psyching yourself out. I mean, I think fumbles are definitely mental, but also, I mean, at that point of the season, ball security has to be second nature. You have to be drilling it, at least once a practice. It takes 5 minutes of practice to drill ball security to the point where you don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does this hurt Genty's draft stock?
I don't think so, because like I said, the moments where he was breaking tackle after tackle, I think proved he belongs at the next level. And with a solid workload at that too, at the next level. There are so many other elements to his production last night. Like his teammates and everything, to where I think he was doing everything he possibly could to win. And look, there are moments where, regardless of how tight you're holding onto the ball, some people are just elite at peanut punching it. And there's only so much you can do in the moment when you're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour as fast as you can, and keeping that ball security. And I mean, that first fumble was a pure punch, like knockout punch, to pop the ball out like that. So
was the first one the one that got popped out and the dude just caught it right on the sideline? That was crazy.
Yeah. So it's just situations that occur during the game. That's the beauty of the game. But yeah, overall, you should probably hang on to the ball as much as you possibly can. But he knows that. Like, who are we to tell him?
Who are we, Scott? We're the No Warm Up Podcast. You kidding me? That's who we are. Mike, is that the worst feeling in football for running back, fumbling and losing?
Yeah, I never really cared.
Selfish
well,
asshole.
because I had a perfect next play mentality. I fumbled the ball. Oh, oops, I dropped it. I'll make it up the next time I get the ball. But you have to really act sad. But if it actually really affects the team, then you feel bad.
You know what's funny, Mike? You put on kind of this emotional, sad performance when you would fumble, even though you didn't really feel it. But then when you would score a touchdown, you would give no emotional performance because it's so nonchalant. You're hard to figure out as a football player.
Well, I just I have a standard that I need to meet, and if I'm not meeting it, then I have to show to other people, look, I'm sad. I'm going to meet the standard next time. But my standard is, scoring touchdowns. I'm not going to celebrate that because I did what I expected to do. Now, I didn't expect to fumble, so I have to show remorse.
Oh, okay. So it's all about just the gap between expectation and reality there.
Precisely.
Okay. All right.
I'm a manipulator.
Yeah. We manipulate the audience here. Guys, keep watching because we have the chess story coming up. Speaking of people, so not living up to expectations, good old Alabama, we didn't hear the end of it when the College Football Playoff Committee announced the 12 teams and Alabama was the first team out. And everyone down there in the South wouldn't shut the hell up that Alabama should be in there. And hypothetically, Alabama would beat all these teams. They're better than ASU, SMU, every single U. And Alabama went on to lose their bowl game to Michigan. The funny thing is, this is the second time they've lost to Michigan this calendar year or last calendar year, because last year I think it was January 1st when they lost to Michigan in the college football playoff, and they did it once again. Scott, thoughts on this, on Alabama, and on kind of just the discourse around the whole thing of Alabama being so cocky and pissed off that they didn't get into the CFP and now embarrassed by a not very good down year Michigan team?
Yeah, this is a bad look for the SEC, which has already been a pretty bad look so far as the CFP has progressed to this point. I mean, obviously Georgia can make up for that today, and Texas as well, even though it's really hard to still consider them an SEC team still. But this is damning to those who were so vocal about the fact that, say, IU didn't deserve to be there, SMU didn't deserve to be there, as well as even Boise State with their automatic bye in the first round. So this is a tough look. You can't have this happen. For all intents and purposes, Michigan had a pretty down year after winning the national championship last year. And granted, yeah, there was turnover, whole new coaching staff, probably a bunch of guys going to the NFL draft and probably transfer portal as well. So like to lose in this fashion, obviously we're seeing here Michigan up 13-0 in the first half is a tough look. And I think they made it up to 16-0 before Alabama got their first point. So for them to not be able to hunker down and get this W it just cuts against everybody's argumentation that the SEC is the best in the world and so on and so forth. Because hey, this wasn't a freezing cold game. This was in temperate weather, and you don't have anything to kind of make an excuse for it other than hey, you lost the ball.
Scott, you used the term nil, 13-0. How
cultured?
European of you?
Cultured.
Wow, you are cultured as hell. For the people who are just listening, we've got this tweet up here. Alabama spent weeks crying about SMU and Indiana not belonging, then showed up like this versus Michigan's 7th string defense. LOL of them just getting roasted. See, this is not a good look for the SEC at all, and also seeing like Tennessee losing. And is this SEC dominance and SEC is so elite? Discord is this kind of just eroding now from what we've seen?
Yeah. It's definitely putting it into question where otherwise it was not so much there prior to the CFP starting. I think for as much as we hate on the NIL era and just it becoming more of a player driven, like what can I get this year from this organization, so on and so forth, it has added to the parity of the game in the college sports realm where it may not have existed prior to. So there is a benefit of this. And I think a lot of people, fans just like to see the giant fall, right? They like to see Goliath fall. And this is what is happening right now with not only Alabama after having a very underwhelming year for their standards, but also the SEC at large.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like the parity argument is very interesting. And there's a lot of credibility with like, even just looking back at the Penn State Boise State game, there is a huge gap in talent on those rosters and the blue chip recruits that Penn State can get that Boise State cannot. I mean, Boise State for the most part historically is signing 2 and 3 star guys out of high school, whereas Penn State is signing 4-star guys, maybe a couple 5-star guys. But now, you're going to be able to pay some superstars to go play for a Boise State, what have you. And so that is interesting because on paper, Boise State really should not be able to compete with a team like Penn State.
Yeah, on paper, sure. But Boise State's a little different because they've had a history of being able to recruit and develop guys, regardless of who's at the helm, whether it be Peterson or anybody else who's taken the helm since. So like they're a little different that they have that sort of ability. But yeah, you're pointing to like a Penn State or a Boise State being able to compete nowadays. But Penn State and the Power 4 teams still have a different level of pay power than, say, a Boise State will, even if they do enter into the NIL more seriously. Like an Ohio State spending roughly $20 million or rumored $20 million on their roster this year. I mean, Boise State's going to pale in comparison, even if they want to compete. Like, will they be able to pay guys $20 million or a roster $20 million per year? I don't know.
Yeah. How does that even work? Does Boise State, so I know they have like the collectives. Does Boise State just need like a super rich donor to just dump into the collective that can get them competitive? Like, where is this money coming from? It's just from all of these.
It's alumni donations. The problem is with this is like it all depends on like how much your alumni really want to see your team in the conversation and competing at the highest level for a long time, right? Because like with this sort of, it's not really an investment. You're not gaining any sort of profit outside of just like that feeling that you're on top or your team is on top. So like there's no benefit. And I think it's just a very difficult proposition for those who don't just have funny money, maybe wealthy, but don't want to necessarily dump money into like, oh, I want to see my football team or college football team win. Like that's a very hard proposition for the development side, universities and all that kind of stuff. And then the collectives as well to just convince donors. Cause obviously there are wealthy people that came out of Boise State, wealthy alumni. It's just a matter of like convincing them. And that's just, again, a hard proposition to make.
Not as many buy stock,
Interesting.
You see that app where you can buy stock in athletes?
What? Really?
You can there's an app. Also, that was my idea years ago, but somebody built it. You can buy stocks in athletes and everything, rise and fall. You can invest. They need to have that for college football teams, especially now in the NIL era, and it's all becoming more and more professional. So
how
like donors and people, they can buy, they can sell, whatever. They can cut off a percentage and sell stock of their team, and then some sort of third party values that stock based off of whatever their performance is or the brand value,
right.
As it rises and falls. The same way an NFL team's brand value rises and falls, You know
whose NFL team, whose brand is falling a lot, Scott? I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Don't worry. Cleveland Browns.
Ah, dude.
Yeah, I had to do it once an episode. I have to do it. That's interesting though, Mike, because then we talked a few shows ago about how, and Scott, you mentioned this as kind of your hypothesis, your Yale genius hypothesis a few weeks ago, that the football teams will become separate from the universities and become owned privately by investors. And there was I can't remember which college it was, but they were in talks of doing that already, of putting in a few $100 million to own 51% of, I can't remember which was it Ohio State? I don't know.
No, it was, I think if I remember correctly, I think you're talking about, it was a former owner of a professional organization that was talking about how collegiate teams could eventually become business-like entities.
Yes.
I'm forgetting his name, but we showed it like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago before the holidays and everything got derailed. But no, it's true. What's going to be interesting is I think it's early April. There's a huge decision coming through the pipe in regards to the NCAA as well as universities and how they are able to pay or not pay players. And I think there's going to be a lot of clarity coming out of that decision. So I don't know if my hypothesis is standing on as strong of legs as I thought it was, because it really kind of hinges on what goes on there. Now, I think we need to get a couple of people who are in collegiate administration, which, here in the near future before that decision comes out, just because there are so many different ways the chips could fall here. But yeah, I still believe that's probably the route it's going to go in the long term. I don't know if it's going to be within the next 5 years though.
If you guys, all right, say we're billionaires, Mike, we sell Quiver, we're just lush with cash, money, Scott, as you say, guys, which university, which football program are you becoming a huge booster to in the same way that kind of Dave Portnoy has been for Michigan? I think he was big in getting that quarterback where they're paying him $8 million. Imagine we're in this scenario from our No Warm Up podcast wealth. Which college or university are you dumping money into and making strong NIL incentives?
Mikey, you go first.
Go first, Mike.
This is beautiful. Number one. This is a great question. I love this fantasy.
This is what I do.
I would love to say Oregon State, but unless I have enough control over the culture of the program and some of the decisions, I don't know if I can give them money. Now, a couple teams that I would give money to and the culture I believe in, Nebraska, Wisconsin, these kind of programs, yeah, you're getting my money.
Cornhuskers. I like that, Mike. You would do well in Nebraska, I think.
I like the culture. It's just tough farmer type players, old school type of mentality.
Yeah,
there we go.
I would say I gotta be a homer here and say the good old Bulldogs, Yale Bulldogs. I would like to help them in all things development wise. But I kind of know how the sausage is made there right now, so some things would need to be shifted a little bit and how the monies are distributed, so on and so forth. But the beautiful thing is now, hey, for the first time, and I know people are probably going to roll their eyes at this, but for the first time in history, Ivy League will now get to compete in the FCS tournament and championship, which is beautiful. This pisses me off that I never got the opportunity, and none of us prior to, because we've had some great teams of the past. We never got the opportunity.
You 1A guys don't know how big of a deal this is over there in your big conferences.
Huge.
Scott and I on our little FCS conferences on the East Coast.
We know how to do tournaments.
Yeah, tournament. There you go.
You guys are a bunch of nerds. Welcome to the big show.
Because the top of the Ivy League is always whoever wins the Ivy League football is probably a top 15 FCS football team almost every single year. Wouldn't you say, Scott?
Yeah. And they're over the past decade, ever since I left, we've had roughly 2 teams on average end up in the top 25 by year end. And that's even only playing 10 games per season per team.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you can make the argument. It's like, oh, okay, well, you had fewer opportunities to lose. Sure. But in terms of like the competition and the out of conference performance, like, dude, the Harvards, Yale has been up there again ever since I left. Weird. And then, of the past, it was like Penn was incredibly dominant. Now Dartmouth, weirdly, is becoming competitive.
It's interesting to see with Harvard and Yale, I think it's not surprising when they are at the top of the Ivy League because just those are such big, famous brands. And sometimes even those schools, back when I was getting recruited and, trying to contact some of these schools, I think Harvard had got like a 4-star recruit.
Yeah.
Like a guy who had SEC offers. And this is not that uncommon. He's like, no, I want to go to Harvard, one of the most famous, prestigious universities in the world.
Yeah.
So that's actually a huge deal that Ivy League schools are able to participate in the FCS playoffs.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that you were discussing having one of the big FCS coaches come on the show here, right? In the near future, your former coach, and maybe he can give some more color to this. But in terms of like our experience and what I can speak to is like, look, the Ivy League has generated some NFL talent. We've had people drafted. You have Kyle Juszczyk, which is a Harvard guy, hate to say it, who was playing during my time, which may have been the 4-star dude you're talking about. But and then you got guys that are running organizations. Like shout out to the GM at the Browns right now as a former Harvard dude. So like there's influence and dudes know ball even in the FCS level and can make huge impacts as we've seen even outside of the Ivy League. Like it only makes sense to allow them to compete at the highest level. And I think NIL is going to influence that level of football to a far greater degree than people realize too.
Dude, I also just realized I played against Kyle Juszczyk when we played Harvard.
Yeah.
I forgot he's like my age. Okay.
Beast, dude.
It was a beast. Harvard smacked us. Well, speaking of which, Georgetown is the school that's going to get my money. Millions. I think Georgetown, you put it in the script the other day, Scott, has had like the tiniest Division I football stadium in all of sports, but it's unique and it's cozy. And they've since the days that we played there, Scott, and when we played against each other, they've polished it up a little bit, but it's right smack dab in the middle of campus. There's dorms around it. If you could make a legitimate size, if you had a little bit of money, a legitimate FCS size stadium, maybe a 10,000, 15,000 person capacity stadium right there. And that would be absolutely incredible. But I think Georgetown is such a cool school to attend, a cool place to go to college. You're in the nation's capital. You're in Washington, D.C. They could elevate that football program with some more money. I think they could also attract some really legitimate talents. And the other thing is they're currently the only team in the Patriot League that can actually give quote unquote athletic scholarships. They have to be creative with how they, get money to players. So they're battling this, but I would give my money to Coach Scarlatta and the Georgetown Hoyas. And he said he's going to come on the show, by the way.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, no, I experienced the same thing. And Ivy League doesn't give out scholarships. So whenever you hear somebody from the Ivy League say that they got a full ride or something, they're absolutely pulling your leg. And you got to question whether or not they went there because that's not a thing. It's all financial based off of your student and home income. It has nothing to do with scholarships.
Bunch of liars.
Yeah.
So there we go. All right. So those are the teams that we will patron. Is that the right word, Scott? Patronize? We will patronize with our wealth when the time comes.
We shall be patrons of these teams, yes.
Okay, there you go. Mikey, we go Georgetown, we go Yale, and then we got Mikey at Nebraska. Buy him some new tractors or something, huh?
Yep. You'll see. You'll all see.
All right, let's move on to the NFL here. Last thing, Scott. Notre Dame and Georgia are playing today. Do you think Notre Dame can pull it off? Are they going to win?
If there was ever a year for them to beat an SEC team at the top of the SEC, it's this year. It's Georgia. They've shown some cracks in the armor, and I think Notre Dame's defense has shown themselves to be very formidable. I think they're within the top 3 defenses in the country. So if they can keep the backup quarterback, who I'm blanking on his name, the guy who got absolutely obliterated in their last game in the SEC championship, if they can keep him contained and the run game contained, they got a shot. It's all dependent upon Jeremiah Love and how he performs in the backfield.
Well, dude, we've already established that the SEC is a bunch of frauds and they're not actually good at football this year. So I think you guys got a great chance.
Yeah, for those teams that lost and embarrassed themselves, but Georgia's still in it. So I am hesitantly optimistic.
I'm trying to curse you guys. Now, all right. Good luck to you guys. I hope that the Williams family are happy in the next 24 hours. Moving to the NFL, and we touched on this guy. This is one of your inspirational guys, Sam Darnold. Check this out here for the people that are just listening. We've got a graphic here of the stats showing Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson's stats this year. And obviously, Allen and Jackson are at kind of the top of the conversation of MVP when anyone is speaking about who's going to win the award this year. But does Sam Darnold legitimately and seriously deserve to be in this conversation with the statistics that he's got right here and with the record that the Vikings have right now being led by Sam Darnold? Do you think that it's a legitimate point?
Yeah, no, that's what I mentioned in at the top of this when we were going over the inspirational things. I'm actually surprised that he isn't more involved in the conversation. I think there's a little bit of a bias going on here because it seems like certain organizations, media organizations, are behind certain players at the top of the list. And I think Sam, they're giving him his flowers and he's getting all of that. He'll probably get like comeback player of the year or something because now all of a sudden it's going from like, oh, did you suck last year to are you good this year kind of thing, as opposed to like, oh, I came back from an injury. So maybe they'll give him that. But I think legitimately, as you're looking at the statistics, and as we've talked about with Joe Burrow specifically, the wins and loss records, that's hard to ignore. On top of, as a former quarterback, completion percentage is insanely important for your offense's viability. And obviously there's an argumentation as like how you're getting those completions. Like, are they dump offs, check downs, all that kind of stuff? Are they swings out of the backfield, like within 5 yards? Like that kind of inflates it. But I mean, shoot, passer rating, yardage, they're all competitive. And just everything he's done so far for the organization that should have been in the pits. It's hard not to add him to this conversation. He's not the flashiest dude, but he's there.
He is not flashy at all, but his statistics, especially dude, the record, man, like they are, I mean, they're playing the Lions this weekend for the number 1 spot in the NFC. That's also wild that whoever basically loses that game is going to go from the number 1 seed in the NFC to a wild card 5th seed in the NFC.
Yeah.
Actually, I got some more on that in a second. I do want to talk about, but yeah, I'm with you. I think Darnold deserves to be in that conversation. The other crazy stat is that I think he's the only player in NFL history besides Aaron Rodgers to have 12 100 plus passer rating games. So it's something like that. He's legitimately having putting up historical numbers in some of these things. But yeah, he really is not flashy. The other thing is I think he leads the NFL in most 20 plus yard passes, which is what you were talking about. Like, he has a really high completion percentage. Okay. That's not that impressive if you're dinking and dunking down the field and just hitting checkdowns, but he's actually throwing the ball down the field. And in reality, he seems to actually do a better job and have more accuracy with the more difficult, challenging throws down the field, as opposed to when he's just dumping it off to a running back in the flat. Sometimes he's behind him. It's like the difficult ones he's having a easier time with. All right, going back to, we were talking about the playoffs and how crazy it is that this Lions-Vikings game is going to determine who's first and who's fifth. Mikey, will you throw this up here, please? Once I click the button, I'm going to click it. And I'm going to click, and there it is. All right. Just looking at this right here. A lot of people are calling for there to be reseeding in the NFL playoffs because of situations like this. Like, we're looking at, like, okay, obviously each team that wins their division gets the automatic bid.
Hmm.
is that fair that the 10-6 LA Rams and the 9-7 Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming out of the atrocious NFC South deserve to be the 4 seed or the 3 seed over Detroit or Minnesota, whoever wins that or whoever loses that game, or the 11-5 Packers? What do you think on the calls to do some reseeding?
I don't love the idea of reworking this entire system because we're obviously experiencing a whole new system with the college football playoff. And it's like, why do we need to change things up just because people want to see a good story happen? It's like, that's not what this is about. This is about competition. And let's just leave it as is.
Yeah, and also, I don't think that you can even say that this would make the good story or that is the good story. I actually think that this is a good story. The fact that these teams, even in the atrocious NFC South, if you win your division, I always have to say atrocious. I hate that division. It's my second least favorite division of football. If you win your division, then you are getting your bid to the playoffs. And that's what really creates those interdivisional rivalries, which are interesting to watch. Some more than others, like obviously the NFC North this year with the Lions and the Vikings and the Packers. That's probably the most interesting, seeing those games. But the historical value of those rivalries is something that we don't want to throw away, and we don't want to diminish the fact that winning your division means so much. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this tweet right here is just a microcosm of what society is really desiring right now. It's like the quick fix, the quick satiation of desire through and through. Thanks social media, but like this is just them wanting to change things up so that they're always entertained. And it's like, dude, the fact that you're not finding entertainment in the beauty of the game of football and it being at the NFL itself, that's on you. That's not on the NFL. It's not incumbent upon the NFL to like jerry rig it for you to be entertained all the time, even though they probably will because it's a business. But it's just, I don't know. This whole energy just pisses me off and frustrates me to no end.
Also, even though the NFC South is atrocious, my third time saying that, I'm not going to say, even though they're 9-7, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are feisty, dude. And I could see them.
No one wants to play them in this
them,
situation.
Right?
Yeah. It's like, and again, any given Sunday, any given Sunday, Monday, Thursday, sometimes
Saturday,
Wednesday.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So. It's like the Tampa Bay has shown itself, especially when they're healthy, when Mike Evans is on the field, dude, they're a scary team. Absolutely scary team.
Also, do not sleep on the LA Rams. I mentioned him last episode. I think that like Sean McVay, like he shouldn't legitimately be in the coach of the year conversation, but I would like to just throw him there as just a little token nomination from our show.
Exactly.
That he's been impressive this year. The Rams are also hitting stride. Man, who do you like out of the NFC?
I mean, I think while everybody's been talking about Green Bay and how they've failed against the top-ranked teams in the division, I think they're 0-4 against both the Vikings and Detroit. We just covered that, right?
Yeah.
I think you kind of convinced me last episode that when you get the better of a team over a course of a season, it always ends up it always comes back to bite you in the ass in the playoffs or something like that. They may have some trick up their sleeve that they learned through their 2 losses. Hopefully they did if they're good coaching and players there. So like, I think the Packers are a sneaky team here.
Mike, can you ask Luke if the Packers plan on winning in the playoffs or if they're going to do losing?
I'll try. We're not on speaking terms ever since he's been on the show.
Well, that's what happens when you come on.
He did actually send me a really funny video of his celebration that he did in practice, which I think is too inappropriate to show on the show. But they do look good. Practice tape looks good.
Actually, Luke had a catch the other night. He's back.
Oh, he's back?
Yeah, he's back, Mike. There we go. I don't know. Out of the NFC for me, what do you think about the Eagles, man? Despite Sirianni and all of his sophomoric teenage energy, which is very inappropriate for a head football coach to have, I like them. I think that they're also super tough right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have an aversion to the Eagles, regardless of where they're sitting or what their record is, especially after last year's kind of wheels falling off after they went 10-0 or 11-0. I just, for some reason, I'm still not sold on Jalen Hurts. And I know he's incredibly gifted and a very good quarterback. I don't believe they have the juice to take it to the next level and get to that top spot.
Yeah, I'm with you, man, on Jalen Hurts. I can't tell. I mean, I think when they were in the Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Chiefs, everyone was like, oh, this is next man up. This is the next Mahomes. We are way too early to judge quarterbacks, both negatively, young quarterbacks, as we did with Baker and Darnold, and also too quick to judge in the positive direction. Because I think you said it, Scott, like one of the really early shows about how, okay, now we've gotten these huge contracts for Jordan Love, Tua, like some of these contracts that do not really match up with the talent and production off the field, or that we're making the judgment for these contracts based on 7, 8, 9 games. And it's like, hey, you can go on kind of a positive 8-game run. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. No. And like, again, I'm not like writing off Jalen Hurts, and nobody cares if I'm the one writing off Jalen Hurts. It's just a matter of like, dude, I'm not 100% convinced that he is the second coming of Patrick Mahomes, right? And like you have to win the big game first in order to, I think, really be considered that next level dude, right? And I feel like there's a push to make him that guy. And I just get the sense, as I mentioned, like, oh, there seem to be just 2 people in this race when there should be a third. Speaking to Sam Darnold, there's just a certain angle that organizations, media organizations want to push. And I get the sense that Jalen's part of that push. Like they want him to be great.
Yeah, he's got a good media campaign team surrounding it. It's like when Harvey Weinstein was doing all these Oscar campaigns for his movies. Yeah, Mike, I brought him up.
Oops. Nick has posters of him all over his wall.
I just love cinema. But having just not necessarily movies that aren't necessarily the best movie of the year, but that had the best Academy Award and Oscar campaign, and I'm not best marketers, and that's what I majored in college, by the way, marketing and propaganda. But I had one more thing to say that was really, really interesting and good about the quarterbacks, and I cannot remember it.
Jalen Hurts getting paid.
Jalen Hurts getting paid, next man up, win the big game. Oh, I was going to say, you said there's 3. Oh, yeah, it was a joke. There's 3 people in the conversation of MVP. I said, no, there's 4 because Joe Burrow is in the conversation. And I will not be told otherwise.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have time for the chess story?
Let's do it. And then
okay. And that's a guarantee. We're going to do a chess segment, and you're going to watch
it.
Because I have a good point about
and
chess.
If we don't
in a chess match, they burn as many calories as a 5-mile run. So if track's a sport, then chess is a sport.
I'm sorry. No.
Save
it for the gosh.
No.
Here we go.
With your Northeast.
Okay.
Yale,
wait, hold on. Is NASCAR a sport or no? Because they burn far more calories and they're actually doing physical activity and using their brain.
It is a sport.
It's on ESPN, isn't it? ESPN 8, the Ocho.
Damn, that's funny. All right, we got to wrap this up because Mikey's thing is way too fucked up now. Well, cut that out. All right. What was the last thing we talked about? Legitimate Jalen Hurts. Oh, Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow. Yeah.
Joe Burrow is in the MVP conversation. All right, there it is.
Go full screen, Nick, so we can cut. It's the easier cut.
All right, there you have it. And looks like we don't have enough time to get to the beloved and so desired chess story today, but hopefully on our next episode we will be talking about chess. Is it a sport? Is it not a sport? Is NASCAR a sport? And we will be touching on these difficult topics in the next episode. All right, guys. Scott, Mikey. Good one. That was fun.